my Travel Wins podcast is pianist keyboard player Kevin Krohn. Kevin has been a professional musician for 30 plus years. He spent time touring as the keyboardist for the 80s band Missing Persons, and more recently toured with the Pink Floyd Experience. He is continuing his playing as part of a dueling piano ensemble in Las Vegas, playing to thousands of people each week. I was really happy getting the chance to speak with Kevin because of his eating choices and being a vegan for the past 27 years while being a touring musician. I know many of us business travelers struggle eating healthy while we're on the road. Not that we have to eat a vegan diet, but more of the idea of making smarter, healthier choices while traveling. I know it's just as easy to grab a candy bar, soda, and some chips versus a protein bar, banana, and water. Personally, I'm trying to be more aware of the positive aspects of eating healthier. Maybe it's just my advancing age. Again, I would like to thank Kevin for his time and sharing his experiences with us. The podcast is now available at www.anchor.fm/thetravelwins or on most podcast platforms using The Travel Wins. Here you go, guys. Here's my podcast with Kevin Krohn. On my Travel Wins podcast tonight is Kevin Krohn. How are you doing tonight, Kevin?
I'm doing great, Pete. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Hey, Kevin is an absolutely outstanding musician, someone I actually look up to. Anybody that plays any instrument as well as you do, I look up to.
Don't put me on any pedestals that are I'm easily knocked off of, but I appreciate that.
Oh no, I mean, hey, you a keyboardist, a piano player, singer, music producing. I know some of your background, but give my listeners an idea of some of your musical background.
Musical background. Well, I started playing.
Let's go all the way back to the long hair days.
We're gonna just jump into the 80s, okay? I'm going to go a little bit before the long hair thing because that's pivotal. I started playing piano just because I seemed to have some sort of affinity for it. My parents immediately taught lessons, and then I kind of did the lesson grind for, like as kids do, for a few years. But then I kind of stopped of my own accord. I didn't really enjoy it. It wasn't really fun for me anymore. I wasn't going to be a concert pianist. I didn't enjoy the recital circuit. That was too nerve-wracking for me. It wasn't my thing. So I sort of gave it up until I was at a party, and I was very shy and kind of awkward in social settings, and was at this house of somebody I barely even knew, and everybody was having a grand old time, but I was sort of like the odd man out. So I kind of wandered around this house and then found a piano in a parlor and sat down, and it was several rooms away from the party. I didn't think anybody would hear me. Started playing, a couple of the pieces that I had been practicing so diligently before I quit. And suddenly, before I knew it, all these people started wandering in and standing around the piano, and I was like, there's something, especially since most of them were girls. I was intrigued by this. Yeah, I was intrigued by this magical power that music seemed to exert. And so, but it really didn't kind of click in for me until high school. I was about 15 years old and going through some stuff as high schoolers do. And I was in the jazz band in high school, but technically my best friend was the jazz piano player of the band, and so they didn't need me really, and so I never learned any of the songs, and they hated my keyboards. The teacher just hated synthesizers, so I pretty much had no function in the band. So I was always banished to the rehearsal room off to the side, and I was earning a steady and solid B. For basically, doing nothing all day. And so it was during one of those moments that I was rehearsing that I managed to start composing my first song. It sort of just kind of came out of me, and I realized with a bit of a shock, it was kind of like a little bit like a jolt, really, that music was more than just playing notes printed on a page written by someone else. I could, if I applied myself, figure out how to express myself or express ideas or feelings or whatever through music. And so that was what really caught fire. And at that moment, I started hanging out with other fellow musicians. And I think that was when the hair growth phase really kicked in, because it never really got past shoulder length in high school. That was later, but it was I was hanging out with guys that, were a little bit ahead of me on that curve and already, wanted to jam and form bands and stuff. And I had never done anything like that. I was a classical pianist, I didn't know anything about rock and roll or that. And so, so I started jamming with one guitar player in particular. His name is Robert. And hey, Robert, if you're listening. And we would practice just random stuff like Iron Maiden on a keyboard and Metallica when they first came out. I mean, it was very strange music to try to play.
Yeah.
And so, but it got me kind of interested in this process of rock and roll. And so surely by the time I was, graduating, 16 years old, just turning 17, I was already forming my first band. And then it kind of went from there. It was originally friends and buddies, and it was all in good fun. And then at some point, I decided that I wanted to take it a little bit more seriously. And then you get into that really weird space where you have to kick your friends out of the band that they formed, basically, or they helped form. Like, okay, that's great, now get out. And then it proceeded down the road of finding other like-minded musicians, and the hair kept growing, and finally it was lustrous and long and beautiful and ringleted, and of course that's all long gone. But at the time it was a look, it was a feel, it was the 80s, It was we weren't really an 80s band in the sense of, I mean, there were keyboards and stuff, but it was really actually the music tended to throw back more towards the progressive rock bands of the 70s, but with 80s clothes. So that was very confusing for people. I think we would go play at these clubs and venues, and people didn't know what to make of us because they were expecting, something more modern sounding because of the way we looked, and yet it was sort of a throwback to this bygone era that was no longer popular. But nevertheless, we sort of were different than all the other bands that were out there in San Diego at the time. And so in relatively short order, we kind of distinguished ourselves as being serious and focused, and got a good reputation as far as cool guys to work with. We didn't have an attitude or ego the way a lot of bands did at that time. And we started opening for national acts. We started opening for people like R.E.O. Speedwagon and Julian Lennon, and competed in a battle of the bands and this kind of stuff. And then, it just sort of all stemmed and flowed from that time.
Well, back then, were you just doing local gigs?
Yeah, well, we so when I kicked everybody out of the band, it was sort of down to me and the guitar player and the singer for a while, and then it took us a really long time to find a bass player and drummer, and nobody was responding to our ads, which at the time it was classified ads. That's how you found people, and nobody was responding to these ads, and I couldn't find anybody, and it was through sheer happenstance. Actually, a funny but very long and convoluted story. But a friend of mine from college was working at a lamp store, and a now friend of mine, but he was unknown to me at the time, keyboard player that was formerly in this other band in San Diego, was shopping for a lamp. And that was the fortuitous meeting that led to a conversation wherein my friend was like, yeah, my friend just cannot find a bass player and a drummer. Look, I know a bass player and a drummer. And so as soon as those guys came over, within 3 weeks, we were off to the races. We were in the Battle of the Bands with 60 other bands in San Diego, and placed third out of 60 bands, and we were only a band for 3 weeks at that time. And then when we started opening for national acts, we did go to Mexico. We went to Tijuana to open for Julian Lennon, and we were getting ready to start traveling and venturing forth to Los Angeles, where primarily everything was really happening. And we wanted to do all that, but we just never got that chance. We decided to focus instead on trying to record an album, which at that time, unless you had a lot of money, entailed, some variation of a multi-track cassette machine, which the results of which were pretty far from professional.
Yeah.
And so
you weren't doing it on tape.
No, not real. I mean, it was cassette tape. So so you can imagine, like, a real band at that time was recording on tape that was 1 or 2 inches wide. I was
going to say 1 inch or
1 or 2. Yeah, that was the standard. And we're trying to squeeze a bunch of information onto, 1/4 inch tape. And so it was challenging and fun. It was great. But it was during that creative process, we had done a bunch of gigs all at once when we first came out, just back to back, just a ton. And then we were thinking, okay, let's release this album. And then from there, we will immediately start to go try to find other shows to support it. But during the recording of the album, as sometimes happens, when it got very intense and it was down to brass tacks, some people started to fall away. The singer started to have second thoughts about even wanting to work that hard on music when he seemed to prefer to play cover tunes.
Yeah.
And that was the last thing I wanted to do. The last cover tune I wanted to have played was, Chopin. For me, that was enough cover music. I did Chopin. That's it. I don't want to play Jump by Van Halen. Sorry. And so, which is ironic considering my current career, but at the time I was very intense about it. And so unfortunately, and then, the bass player knocks up this girl and this guy with this girlfriend, and suddenly I was 10 years younger than everybody else in the band. So they were going through normal life stuff of guys in their late 20s, and I was still a teenager going, what the hell is going on here?
I thought we were making music.
You don't need that girl. I literally said to at least 4 different friends of mine, you don't need that girl. Don't tie yourself down with it. You're going to regret it. And then these are guys that have gone on to have families and wonderfully successful lives with these people. I've had to apologize to their women since then. But so it was, we never made it that far. We, all the traveling I ever did with music came later. But with my own band, we besides Tijuana, we never got to that next step. And I always lament that fact. But we would have had a good time. I think we would have gone over well in LA. I really do. But we just never got to find out.
As a keyboardist, since that time, you've gone on, you toured that I personally saw with the Pink Floyd Experience.
Right. That was a lot of fun.
Missing Persons.
Yep, I got to play keyboards for Missing Persons, the 80s legends, for a while. That was a really good time.
What was it like traveling? Okay, well, let me step back real quick.
Sure.
You've been a vegan for how long?
27 years.
I personally can't imagine being a true hardcore vegan while traveling every day in a bus with a whole bunch of other people. How difficult was it, or is it, traveling?
I'm glad you differentiated between was it and is it, because there is a distinction. Back in the day, it was really, really hard.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I was super committed. And so I didn't allow myself the luxury of, for example, I have a friend who generally eats vegan or identifies as a vegan who's currently on tour. I won't call him out. I won't vegan dox him right now, but he's out on tour right now, and he straight up admitted that he's in full-on survival Flexitarian mode, where he's just eating whatever presents itself because he just doesn't have the means or resources or time or energy to try to run down every single meal every single day for a month. He just doesn't want to deal with it. And some people feel that way, and I totally understand that. But for me, there was no option. I really was so committed to the cause and was even an activist for a while, so it just would have been the height of hypocrisy for me to abandon it just because it was inconvenient. So what that resulted in was a lot of unhealthy eating, because back in the day, pretty much the only thing you could routinely find on the road was French fries, which are not always vegan anyway, but I found the ones that were, and then salads, and then much later I discovered that there were a couple of vegan items to be found at a Taco Bell or whatever. So there was one tour in particular I remember being on the road from coast to coast, and the funny part of this particular story is that the guy that was driving us from one coast to the next worked at a Denny's in San Diego, and he assured me that he knew how to speak Denny's. He knew that lingo fluently, and that he was going to set me up. He was going to have conversations with management at every Denny's along the way from coast to coast and make sure that I had stir fries and this and that, one thing or another. And we were somewhere in the Midwest, and he said, I was hoping I could get my man a plate of some broccoli. And the waitress literally stopped writing on her pad and looked up and cocked her head quizzically and said, broccoli?
Oh my gosh.
As if she had never even heard of such a thing before, which is pretty indicative of where I was at. And then the one time on the tour I did indulge in Taco Bell, I got food poisoning, and that was a huge mistake. So
it was karma. It was teaching you a lesson.
It was vegan, but it was still poisoned for whatever reason. And so that was then. Okay, so now, flash forward to now, we are living in a different time. I mean, right now, I just there are postings on social media about Del Taco is testing using a product called the Beyond Burger, which is a very popular new meat substitute. It's very much like a hamburger, and they're actually beta testing using Beyond meat crumbles in their tacos and such. And so that is absolutely astonishing to me. I mean, back in the day, it was just like if I could get steamed vegetables, brown rice, and some black beans, I was a happy camper. And the idea of being able to go to a fast food restaurant and order a beef burrito, that's vegan is absolutely astonishing. And so, but that's kind of the sign of the times. And so there are really two companies competing in that space. There's something called the Impossible Burger and then the Beyond Burger. And these two companies have managed to capture an amazing amount of market share in terms of whether it's Red Robin or chain restaurants or fast food, and they're just continually making inroads into these different areas where pretty soon I think Cheesecake Factory is testing something right now, and so it's just amazing. I believe even IKEA just started serving a vegan hot dog, for crying out loud. So it's a whole new world. There are a lot of exciting products out there, although they do tend more towards this idea of sort of meat substitutes and fake meats, which not all vegans are really fond of. Yeah. It's a highly processed product. It's not like health food in the strictest sense. Just because it's vegan, and this is an important distinction that people just clearly don't understand, is just because it's vegan does not in any way mean that it's good for you. Right. It's just not the case at all.
Well, but, there are some vegan chorizos that are, 80% fat.
Oh, they're terrible. And they're so loaded with sodium.
Yeah.
So loaded with sodium, and some of them have, like, weird byproducts that are, I guess, technically vegan, like caramel colors and other things that are known carcinogens. And so it really starts to blur. What I've found over the years, this is really interesting to me, too, about veganism and its development over the years, is that weirdly enough, we're in the information age with the internet, so you would think that it would be easier than ever to sort of identify and hone in on what is and is not vegan, and then sort of also have a more sort of standardized definition of what that entails. But in reality, now it's more confusing than ever, because before you used to get all of your information from very careful study and research. This is pre-internet, obviously, and there were activists, like when PETA was this homespun organization with only a few thousand members, and they were hand printing pamphlets. It's very different from the PETA of today. They had two branches, and one was very militant and one was a little bit softer of a face for the public, but both of them were pretty clear on the mission of veganism, which was to do the least amount of harm possible by your dietary choices, and that included all manner of byproducts. And so it was pretty easy to sort of go, this is bad, this is good, this is yes, this is no. Now we've got a bunch of vegans fighting with each other online. I'm frequently the instigator of such arguments, but I can't help it, because there are certain things that I think are so randomly hypocritical that are widely embraced. PETA decided about, I think it's got to be about 5 or 6 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer, that their mission had changed, that they decided that to steer people away from animal agriculture and towards plant-based eating was much more important than any sort of perception of purity or walking a hard line. So one of the most popular campaigns in recent years was this idea of accidentally vegan, like things that you don't know that you're surrounded by that are accidentally vegan if you just ask, and this would be things like fast food or Domino's pizza or whatever. But they threw into that list things like Oreos and a certain strain of Doritos, and there were just, different random things. And
but are completely unhealthy for you.
They're unhealthy, but more to the point, they do actually still contain not necessarily strictly vegan things. And two of the main ones that I constantly am kind of aggrieved by are sugar, which regular sugar was a big no-no for vegans for a really long time, because so much of it is processed using bone char.
Bone, yeah.
Right. So that was like, there's no bone in it. Technically, the end product is a vegan product, but, if
processed with bone char.
Right. So, and really, it's not even so much this idea of like, it touched bone char. Things that touch bone will never touch my lips. It's really not about that. It was about the idea that, this bone char is just a byproduct of the larger industry.
Animal agriculture.
Exactly. And so anything that we are doing to help monetize those byproducts is in some way indirectly, bolstering the entire economy of animal agriculture. And so from an activism standpoint, that is a big no-no. And then the other thing is, and yet it's been widely accepted. There are a lot of vegans that just do not care about that at all and eat sugar all day long and never give it a second thought. And then also sugar, in modern times, a lot of it is GMO sugar, beet-derived GMO sugar, and GMOs are not necessarily not vegan, but you don't know whether they are because they can use genes from all over the place. For example, they're growing a GMO tomato that uses a fish gene to retard spoilage. So that is definitely decisively not a vegan thing at that point. And this is all...
GMO being genetically modified.
Right, genetically modified organism is what GMO stands for, and they're widely banned or at least exhaustively labeled in the EU, in Canada, everywhere else. But in America, where money talks and there's a lot of influence and control wielded over the marketplace by a special interest, for whatever reason, we don't have access to that information. In fact, there's a lot of at that level pushback against the idea of labeling these products or identifying them as such. So you're really kind of in the dark. And so there's a really easy way to prevent against GMO ingestion, and that's to eat organic. If it is organic, by definition, it cannot contain GMOs. And so these little things made things, to me, it wasn't restrictive at all. It made life much easier. It was easier to just go, okay, so this is the thing that I'm after, and this will prevent me from accidentally ingesting this. So therefore, I'll go ahead and eat this way, and it'll be much easier. And instead, now people are just like, but I want it to be even easier than that still and eat my Oreos. And so it's hard to argue with those people because they'll just come back with, well, there's no bone in the finished product. And they're technically correct. But, it's sort of like it's like an arbitrary line in the sand. And I guess we all draw ours where we will. And there's no such thing as purity. That's unattainable. That's not even the goal, but I just wish there was some sort of standard that we all agreed on, and there used to be. That's the crazy thing. Back before all of this information and disinformation, there was a standard we all sort of adhered to and agreed to, and now it's all over the place. And the other thing along those lines being palm oil, which is, come into such heavy rotation due to the ban on trans fats in the marketplace. They needed a shelf-stable fat that had a neutral flavor profile. And palm oil fit the bill perfectly, and so there's been massive explosion of palm oil production and usage, and it is an incredibly resource-intensive and animal endangering substance. I mean, they burn down entire forests to plant plantations for this stuff, and even when they plant the plantations, orangutans and other species that are indigenous to those trees and hang out are burned out of the forest or captured or killed, and a myriad of horrible, grisly ways. And so it is literally one of the most destructive products I can even possibly imagine in terms of the toll it takes on animal welfare. And yet it is absolutely universally embraced, seemingly, by most vegans. And it really rears its ugly head when it comes to things like crackers and cookies and donuts and treats and totally non-essential for life, non-essential for survival kinds of things that people want to have access to, which I completely understand and I'm all for. But I just feel like if the credo is to do the least amount of harm, that this is not the way to do it. And then you bring this up to people and they will straight up unfriend you, they'll block you, they'll curse you, they'll slander you, they'll, pick a fight with you.
Hey. It almost sounds like you're talking about politics.
It feels that way. I assiduously avoid any discussion of religion, politics, philosophy online because of that exact thing, because you can so easily find yourself in the weeds and get yourself in trouble with people you've known your whole life, or family members or whatever. So I avoid all of that, and then yet I cannot quite help myself. Every once in a while, I will wade into the deep waters of discussions of, there's constant postings in San Diego, vegan groups about, like, this place has vegan donuts. And so, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer and go, wah, wah, but it's sort of like there really aren't any, in my estimation, truly vegan donuts in the entire county of San Diego. Nobody has made a stand and said, I will not use palm oil in my donuts. Everybody to the last is using palm oil to either make the donuts or fry the donuts. And so to that end, they're not, in my estimation, a vegan product. But
you don't need donuts.
And you don't friggin' need donuts. So, but I like donuts. I mean, in Vegas, which is where I am currently performing, there is a donut shop that has been around. It's award-winning. It's been best of Vegas many times over. People don't even know that they're vegan donuts. They have no idea. There's no signage anywhere that proclaims vegan donuts. It's just something they chose to do for their own reasons, and they do not use, as far as I know, I'll have to check, it's been a minute, but as far as I knew, they use soybean oil and some other things, and, there's some other problems with that, but generally speaking, not as destructive as palm oil. And so it can be done. And I know that there are places around the globe that there are people doing it without it. And so really, to me, these are the kinds of compromises that I don't understand. I think that there are compromises that have to be made all around in terms of trying to be a vegan in this world, because, like I said, purity is unattainable. But to make these kinds of silly compromises or sort of logically fallacious compromises, I don't really understand that. I would prefer it if we could all kind of get on a page about this thing, and it seems to be a very divisive subject. So it's very funny to me that things are getting more difficult as we go, not less. I just don't understand.
Well, let me ask you this question.
Sure.
Do you think eating cleaner, being a vegan, helped you while you were traveling on the road? I mean, there are so many diseases and just in general health issues. Eating the crap food that's available. I mean, for me, I travel in towns like Selma, California.
Oh yeah.
Town of 2,000 people. You've got Taco Bell, Carl's Jr., McDonald's, a Denny's, and a and a roadside cafe, and it's like, well, jeez. It's like I feel like I'm picking the poison. But when you're traveling, do you feel you actually felt better eating the cleaner, or was it just the way you were and that was it?
More recently, that is the case. In other words, when I was on the Pink Floyd Experience tour, which is where you saw, the restaurant choices because there were, let's see, so the singer of the band and I were both vegan, and I believe one of the other guys was sort of attempting veganism or was willing to explore veganism. And so we went out of our way to, there are now a wonderful variety of websites dedicated to helping you find veganism wherever it may be. And even really using something like Google Maps will allow you to say, if you enable the location function on your phone and you speak into Google Maps and go, vegan food near me, it can be as simple as that. Anyone who has put any meta tags on their establishment as having anything vegan friendly is going to pop right up. And sometimes that is Taco Bell, but sometimes it's some mom and pop place you've never heard of. And so much to my delight, I found a lot of really great places that, were maybe a little off the beaten path. It maybe took me a minute of effort to go find them or whatever, but it was always a bit of an adventure. And I definitely felt nourished and healthy and vibrant. And it was a lot better in my estimation than I was looking at. I don't mean to judge, but I was looking at the food that the guys were eating on the tour that was either catered or provided or whatever, or they would frequently be given money by the venue to, say, order pizzas or ribs or whatever it was. And all animal origins of that food aside, it just didn't look like good food. It didn't look like good, nourishing food. And there was a monotony to it. It was like either a cold cut platter or pizzas or this or that. It was maybe one of four things again and again and again. Whereas I was eating this constantly revolving array of Mediterranean, Indian, Ethiopian food in one case, lots of Thai, a really nice array of things. And then on the last tour, I got to even kind of leapfrog past all of that by assembling a mobile kitchen in a road case.
Oh, nice.
And I actually bought this enormous road cake, and I filled it full of induction cooktops and pots and pans and spices and oils and ingredients. And they trucked this thing, across the country for me. And other than the one time I almost set the building on fire, it was great.
Well, what would a rock tour be without, a little fire?
It was a very Spinal Tapian moment. They literally had to clear the theater, and it was all my fault. But it was before and after that, it was really great to be able to have and actually, in one case, I was blown away because we went to a venue, and they not only were accommodating. I mean, everybody tried to be, but with varying degrees of success. And so sometimes you'd show up, and they'd be like, "We got you hooked up," and then you'd see what they had, and you'd be like, And then, but other places, one time I walked in, and they had spent. I can't imagine that it cost them any less than maybe $200. They must have spent $200 on all these vegan fresh ingredients, dried legumes, stuff I took with me. They're like, Take it all. Just take it all with you when you go. Dried legumes and fresh produce and all these things. And it was just and they gave me a commercial kitchen to prepare it all in. I'm like, this is amazing. And so I would be cooking all this great fresh food, and the guys would come in from the tour bus, and they were so jealous. They could smell it down the hall, and they'd be like, what are you cooking up in here? Then they'd have to go to their sad little meat tray or their little pizza stack, and go like, pizza again. And I felt for him. It's funny because the thing that was so inconveniencing once upon a time was actually now this sort of additional dimension to my adventures of being on the road. It was a part of my challenge of being on the road was sort of, not just eating healthy, but really exploring all these wonderful options that were available and making these guys jealous in the process. That was a lot of fun.
So let me ask you this. For me, my travel win is photography. I love taking photos, all the places I travel, different shots and this and that. What was your travel win? Your food in the restaurants and the choices?
Yeah, I think so. Because I wish I had an eye for photography, but I never really have. I loved taking in the sights whenever possible, but we didn't always have the luxury of a lot of time to go out venturing forth. And so really it did sort of unfortunately become sort of the quest for food more often than not. But I made it fun. I tried to make that a good time in and of itself. And so, just meeting people. I love talking to restaurateurs. I secretly am a frustrated restaurateur. If I could have the wherewithal and the funds and the patience and the time to build a successful restaurant, I think that would be my dream come true. So I constantly pick the brains of and have these conversations with people from, all walks of life as I travel. And so that was really it for me. It was connecting with people and sort of seeing this spreading awareness of veganism, enthusiasm for it, and people that were not themselves vegan but recognized that market forces were changing, and they were kind of, making concessions to that. And it was really interesting and you end up talking to some people that you might end up actually informing them about something they weren't aware of, and they might actually go so far as to reformulate their recipes based on a recommendation you made. So that happened a few times along the way. It was all a lot of fun for me in that regard. But otherwise, I took a lot of tools to make music with me on the road. I never used any of them. I feel really badly about that. I even had little backpacking instruments that I should have gone on hikes and been looking at natural wonders and sitting there playing music, and none of that ever happened.
Well, I'm the same way. Not so much now. I really try to make time within my schedule to be able to go to Monterey or Carmel and take some photos or that type of thing, and I'll physically make time to go do it.
You're lucky.
Well, when I started, it was just like, let me get up there, let me do my appointments, let me get home.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I would fly to Oregon to help open up a store, and I would not make no time. And I'd be like, okay, well, if I have to work Friday and Saturday, I would fly in late Thursday night, work Friday, go to the company dinner thing Friday night, work Saturday, and then fly home Saturday night. But I'd get home and people were like, oh, did you go see that? I'm like, no. Did you go do that? I'm like, no. Well, did you see that museum? No. And so now I'll fly in Thursday morning instead of Thursday night and try and take that 3 or 4 hours and go to a museum or go to the waterfalls or go see some national park type thing. And that's
great. That's inspiring. I should be doing that now The problem with being on tour is that you're not in control of your transportation.
Yeah, see, exactly.
You're being schlepped from place to place, and they give you an itinerary for the day, and very little of it entails anything that you want to do. So it's more like, okay, you've got this free hour. Are you going to go wandering around the town, or are you going to take a nap? And usually naps one. But now I have no excuse. I drive myself back and forth from Vegas to San Diego. I should be taking more advantage of that, but I'm sort of where you were. I'm at this place where, for me, the work and being away from home is it's sort of a necessity. I kind of grit my teeth and bear it, and I just kind of get in just the night before, and then I'm kind of working, keeping my head down, and during the day I sort of am resting up for the work, and as soon as I'm done, I get the heck out of Dodge. And so it's a shame, because actually Vegas, aside from all the touristy things that I have no interest in because I lived here for so long, those don't appeal to me. But Vegas does have a lot of natural beauty, and I haven't availed myself of much of it, like the Valley of Fire and Mount Charleston,
Red Rocks and
Red Rock Canyon and all this other stuff. And yeah, it's just really a lot of beautiful stuff, and I should totally be doing that, and I don't at all.
Well, even like the things I try and do, because I'm in Vegas about a month a year just for work.
Oh, right.
And the Neon Museum is super cool.
Oh yeah, I keep wanting to go to that. Is it called the museum, or is it? I thought it was called the Neon. Is it the Neon Graveyard? Or?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called.
I like that idea better. I like the idea of it being a neon graveyard. It just sounds cool.
The Mob Museum in downtown is cool.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
So but that's what I try and do is like I'm supposed to go to Jackson, Mississippi in November to open up a store. So I'm already looking around. Okay, for me, it makes, because if I just went to Jackson, Mississippi and worked for 2 days and came home, it just sucks. I mean, that's, it's just, a 5-hour flight, rent a car, blah, blah. But now I'm like, okay, where's the museum? Where's what, and then I look up photography like I'll look up Jackson, Mississippi photography in Google and just see what other people are taking photos of. And I'm like, oh, that might be cool, or, but it just gives me something else to think about other than just work. It just takes the stress, because I'm in sales. So it's like I'm going up to Northern California on next Monday. If I don't sell anything, it's just a really expensive vacation to a place I've been to a lot.
Sure.
For you, I mean, you're going to get paid by doing all these tour dates and gigs and all that. For me, it's like there's a lot of pressure. I got to make money.
Yeah, well, actually, this thing that I'm doing now, dueling pianos, and especially in Vegas, it's not that different than a sales job. I actually consider myself to be a glorified liquor salesman now, which is maybe not something that people really relate to, but it really does feel that way. In other words, our efforts are now directly tied to our bottom line. Yeah, we get a certain amount of a paycheck just for showing up, but that's not really where the money's at. So the money is at sort of successfully selling people on their good time, and then for the bar, the money is all about there is no show unless we make them money. Yep. And so I really do feel a lot of those same pressures. And
I hear you. I mean,
yeah, it's not really a leisurely. People think, oh, you're doing what you love. Well, I mean, I'm playing music. I'm playing music, which is better than taking ditches, which I've done, and better than many other. I've done every conceivable job you could possibly imagine. It's better in that regard. It's closer to what I wanted to do in my life. But at the end of the day, I certainly had never imagined that a lot of what being a performer is about is sort of still selling a product. And whether that's booze at a bar or selling you and your image and music and art commercially to people, they're not that different from each other. And so it for whatever reason, it takes a little bit of that joy of the purpose of why I'm here kind of out of it. I'm trying to fight against that by finding the ways to make it more gratifying. But for right now, the thing in Vegas that it must sound very exhausting to somebody who's not in this headspace of being a vegan, but one of my joys is sort of constantly finding new vegan joints, so that when I do have, and they're opening in Vegas at an astonishing rate.
Yeah,
I mean,
they are.
More than anywhere that I know about. I would say more actively opening here than Los Angeles and San Diego, which is surprising. Southern California was the hotbed leader.
But there are already a lot of places in LA.
There's a ton, and some of them are short-lived, and it's always sad to see them kind of come and go. The rents are so expensive there. It makes it much harder for these businesses to ever gain a toehold in the marketplace. But here, it's a great, cool thing to be able to go, well, what new vegan spot am I going to discover today? And so, that's not nearly as cool of an adventure as what you're talking about, but it does bring me
it is though. It is though, because I'll tell you something. Almost all the musicians I've talked to or met they almost always have a side hustle or multiple things going on, because it's so difficult to make money as a true 100% musician.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've met very successful musicians for big bands that were on Ozfest and different things, and they're doing drum lessons on the side. They're doing studio sessions, when they're not touring, to try and make money, because it's difficult.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, I don't know if you read the article that was going around. I forget exactly which artist it was, but some very famous person, very famous, successful artist with millions of records sold, recently went and spoke to Congress and showed that after some crazy number of spins of their music, that they had generated all of about $400 or something, negligible. And so it's nothing like it used to be. I don't know of anybody that's actively making riches in music right now. Even some of the national talents I know, when they're not actively playing and generating funds from the show revenue, they are really struggling. I mean, some of them are couch surfing, so I consider myself to be very blessed and lucky that, I mean, I'm a dancing monkey by comparison. They're doing art and I'm doing commerce, is how I look at it. But at the same time, pretty considerably good fortune to be able to play music and make a living simultaneously, because that's just not reflective of the industry in its current state much at all.
Well, that's I mean, and I know they love it, but that's why the Rolling Stones are still touring, or
right.
Who came out with another tour, and I mean, these are massive bands that have made millions of dollars, but yet they need to tour because the record sales part of it is pretty much gone.
That's exactly right. So back before, when they were sitting in their mansions, all they had to do was let the money roll in from the licensing of either the revenue, the royalties of the spins on the radio, which were much more substantial than the current streaming business model, which is fractions of a penny per spin. Which is, compare that to, say, Michael Jackson, who made history for negotiating his royalty rate up to a dime per song per spin. So if you take that and multiply that all 24-hour cycle, every radio station around the world. This is why he had the Neverland Ranch, right? This is why he was just awash in millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's just not happening anymore. So if you're the Rolling Stones, you're the Who, or these guys that have mansions and all these cars and a staff of employees or whatever. The only way to pay for it is to get up off the couch and go out and sing for your supper, which is definitely
merch
humbling.
Sales and stream, in the streams.
Yeah, it's a whole different ballgame now, and so it's an interesting time out there to be.
For all the travel you've done over the last couple of years, we'll say, what's the hardest part about traveling while you're working? I mean, not for fun, but has it been the food, or are there other things? I.e., work-life balance.
Yeah, right. So back in the day, food was definitely the biggest issue, because if you're surviving on pure carbohydrates and salads, you're going to feel tired. You're going to feel cranky. You're going to feel unhealthy. So I think it was much harder back in we're talking about 20 years ago, much more difficult to sort of be happy about being out on the road. Now it's really not like that. The main hardship for me about being gone is the time spent away from family. Even with telecommuting and being able to, video chat with people, which is pretty Jetsony stuff. It's amazing. there's still no substitution for physically being present in the lives of your loved ones. And so being gone for any length of time, that is what I find to be the most difficult. I was able to conquer some of the other standard difficulties. Like, for example, one of the things about being on a tour bus that's really unpleasant is that you're not sleeping in your own bed. And if you have back problems like I do, I have a lifetime of back problems, that could potentially derail you pretty quickly. And so I conquered that by purchasing this very bougie, expensive Tempur-Pedic sort of narrow pad.
Yeah.
Right. And then so I got used to sleeping on it at home. And then when I went on the tour bus, I just slipped it into the bunk on the tour bus. And whereas everybody else was like, oh, I missed my bed, I'm like, this is my bed. This is the same bed. So that kind of thing, like being inventive about that made, and then also, you know, I mean, compared to back in the old days of, let's say you wanted to entertain yourself, you'd have to carry around a portable DVD player of some kind. Those were always pretty sketchy and, you know, very, very inconvenient to truck around a boatload of DVDs or whatever. Now it's just like download albums albums into the iPad. You can download stuff off of Netflix that you can watch when it's offline and you have no internet connection. I mean, technology has made so many of the things that are so kind of stifling about being on the road and really taken them out of the equation. So really for me, the only thing that really bums me out is being away from my family. Otherwise, I would do it more. If I didn't have that sort of limitation, I would be on the road much more because it's actually a pretty great way to get to see the country. Although you don't get to spend a lot of time in each place, you do get at least some sense of the flavor. When you interact with the people and then you go to the restaurant and you walk through the town, you at least get a glimpse into this alternative universe that exists even within the United States of all these different lives being led in all these different ways. It's really cool. But so now the travel is more monotonous. It's just between two places again and again every week. And so it's, I think the hardest part of that is just the monotony of all that time spent in a car. I just hate it. Self-driving. Sorry,
I'll give you some alternate routes to get to Vegas. That'll blow your mind.
That'd be great. That'd be cool. Unfortunately, I do it at night, so there's nothing to see. Even if you routed me through Joshua Tree or someplace spectacular, I'm doing the drive at night, so there's nothing really to see. There's nowhere to go. Everything's closed. You know, so it sort of
changes everything, my friend.
Yeah, so you know, like during the day on my way back, conceivably I could make a detour or whatever, but really I just want to get home, and I'm trying to. On top of that, I'm trying to get through that Riverside LA corridor just before traffic takes it from a 5-hour drive to a 7 or 8 hour drive, and so it's definitely a challenge to stay motivated.
Offline, I'll give you some alternates, and they're quick stops, but you'll just be like, what?
Yeah, cool. I love it.
You know, so you're gone about half the time. The hardest part is for you right now is family, which is, you know, it's the same way for me. I mean, my daughters have moved out and they're adults, but, you know, I'm still married. And for me, I try, like, I'm going to Northern California next week, and I'm trying to limit as much time as possible of being gone. So I'm trying to be more, you know, steadfast with my scheduling. But, you know, like you were saying, the technology thing, and younger people will never understand what it's like to not have a cell phone, what it's like to not have GPS, or Google Maps, or for me, you know, like I use the iMaps. It tells me where there's accidents, tells me alternate routes, it tells me what time I'm going to get there, and that thing's pretty damn accurate.
Yeah, it's actually, I actually marvel at technology on the daily. I mean, I hate to sound like an old person here, but
that's me. Yeah.
I mean, how old? Well, we don't have to get into ages, but I'm
51.
I'm almost 50. I'm 49, and we'll be 50 next year. And so we came up about at the same time. So we watched the dawning of the digital age happen. We went from rotary phones in our lifetime to these miracle devices that I'm trying to think of what the craziest thing I just recently did with the phone was. I was just like, I need to take it. Oh, yeah, yesterday. I went to Whole Foods. I was starving. And I slept in, and I had no food in the house here in Vegas, and I was just desperate to get some food. And I get all the way down there, and I realize, like a complete dumbass, that I'd forgotten my wallet.
Yeah.
And so I'm standing there like, oh, my God, like, do I really have to fight traffic and go 20 minutes back across town to get my wallet to come all the way back here? I probably won't. If that's what happens, I probably won't do it. I'll probably grab my wallet and go to the local supermarket and get much poorer quality of food. I won't get any of the stuff I wanted. I won't be able to stock up for the week like I planned. I really screwed myself here. And then I thought about it, and I was like, wait a second. So phone in hand, Google, what forms of payment does Whole Foods accept? Right. And then up came all the traditional currencies, but then also up came Google Pay, Android Pay, all these different sort of alternative portals. And I was like, holy crap. And so I, was able to sign up for Google Pay right then and there. And then because of the autofill function and fingerprint recognition, I mean, this is all like James Bond stuff.
Yeah.
Fingerprint recognition.
Jetson stuff.
Jetsons, and so it absolutely like auto-filled my credit card, which I used to memorize my credit card information, but it's been a long time since I've had to do that. And so it just auto-filled it. All I had to do was like, I remember the 3-digit code. And so, put that in, and then suddenly I'm standing there, I wave my phone in front of the little machine at the checkout counter, and I walk out with bags of groceries. I couldn't believe it.
It's crazy.
It's magic. And like you said, there are entire generations that to them, that's just business as usual. And to me, that is literally one of the most remarkable things that's ever happened to me. It's like 1 second I was devoid of food, and the next second I was burdened down by this, bounty of amazing things. So it's just like, wow.
Well, for me, the most amazing thing I've done on my phone is my podcast.
Right.
I mean, in the era we grew up, if you listen to the radio, and it wasn't my dad controlling what station to listen to, it was a big thing to be on the radio and have your voice heard and all that. It was huge. I mean, people went to broadcasting school for it.
Oh, yeah.
And now I'm literally talking to NBA players and magicians and wonderful musicians like yourself, all via this crazy world of podcasts. And now, I start seeing my downloads, my likes, and people are listening to my podcast on their cars, and I'm like, it's just a crazy world that you have to embrace. It's super cool.
It's really amazing. And that applies all across the board to the democratization of every entertainment medium. So in other words, you used to have to go to film school to shoot a movie, and now people are getting image stabilizing little handheld devices and using smartphones to film movies.
Which they're very cool though.
I'm sure that's really cool. And then for music, it used to be like, if you, like I said, the closest you could come, unless you were loaded with money and had the money to build your own recording studio from the ground up with all this outboard equipment and, tube amplifiers and all this other stuff, was these little sort of Porta Studio cassette-driven things that didn't result in anything remotely professional sounding. Now I can take my iPad or my phone, for that matter, and I can use it as an instrument if I want to. I can connect a keyboard via one cable to an iPad and then audio out of the iPad, and I can use it to simulate an entire rack of synthesizers. I can use it to substitute in lieu of a recording studio. GarageBand is built into iPads. You can use GarageBand to create commercial quality clips and loops that I've heard people use for commercials and movies. And I mean, that's just like, it's unbelievable. But what's so weird though, and I don't know if you've noticed this, because your thing is photography. So, I still can tell the difference between somebody who has a really great camera and somebody who's using a really good cell phone. The cell phones obviously come a really long way. They're 9 megapixel cameras and stuff. But when you see somebody take a truly high definition photograph, and a lot of it is the eye of the photographer, but so it seems to me that while there's a lot of pictures, there's a glut of pictures out there, it hasn't quite evened out so much. You still have to be pretty good at the act of photography to capture a really compelling image.
My thing with photography, it's kind of like probably music for you is, well, and no, let me rephrase that. Probably not for you. Like you've been a musician for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Safe to say, right?
Yeah.
And I've been a photographer for 7, 8 years, if that. Yeah, 8 years maybe. And you're right. When I go to a gallery and I'm looking at photos and I'm like, holy Christ, that's a great picture. I mean, just holy Christ, that's phenomenal. It's like for my daughter when my daughter makes music, and and I listened to her music, I'm like, God, that sounds great. She goes, yeah, but that's bad. That doesn't sound great. But it's the best I could do on GarageBand, and
GarageBand, gotta love it.
And I'm like, yeah, but that's really good. And she goes, yeah, but and I do the same thing with photography. So when I look at my photography, I go, yeah, mine's good, but God, that's not compared to that one. I'm always comparing. So it's very difficult for me to, like, I've sold some photos, and they're in people's homes that I haven't met. I didn't, there weren't friends that bought, some of my photos. These were people that went to a store and went, I want to see that every day in my house. And to me, that just blows me away. It's just like, when you play music, without you, like, you call yourself the dancing monkey and this and that, but I guarantee you, over the years, you've inspired somebody to become a musician or do something in music because of things you've been a part of. And to me, that's the amazing part.
I can only hope that that's true. That sure would be great. I mean, certainly I was inspired by people, and that was always my whole goal, was to pay that forward, because really at the time that I was mentioning being in high school and I started to write my first song, that was an outgrowth of depression. I mean, a depression I almost didn't survive.
Yeah.
And so the fact that music was able to be such a powerful motivational force to remain alive and to keep fighting and striving and push forward, I always wanted to pay that back. And it's certainly, as a entertainer, I don't know that really happens a lot.
It
you
does.
know what I mean? Because the thing with dueling pianos and this thing is that I feel less like a musician and more like an entertainer. I kind of think that there is a distinction between the two. And so I was really hoping that it was something that had actually come from my heart, some original thought or notes or words that would resonate with somebody and would have the effect that you're describing. But it didn't seem to happen that much, or if it did, I don't know about it.
Well, and that's the whole thing. I mean, because I'll tell you something. Like on your Facebook, you had the Chris Cornell cover. I think it was Rolling Stone.
Like a Stone, it's called.
Like a Stone, yeah.
Audio Slave Stone.
And so yeah, Dancing Monkey, but that's a really good version of a song you don't hear too often, obviously, in a dueling piano scenario.
Never
scene. And so, and then it gets put on Facebook, and so who's watching that going, God, and feeling really good about, because like Chris Cornell was the man to me.
Yeah, he was amazing.
So, you're playing things that you never know who's, inspiring or continuing, don't end up like Chris. You know what I mean?
Well, there's that element. I never thought of that. I mean, the one thing that I take to heart about it is that, and this is something that my girlfriend has to remind me of constantly, because I do sometimes feel a little down about the idea that I'm not creating my own art and contributing something original to the world at the pace that I used to. My output used to be quite high, and I was constantly striving for almost exclusively that. Right. And now it's sort of flipped, and so now I do music as a living, and so I don't spend nearly enough time on creation and original art. But one thing that she reminded me is that in hard times, which I think that we can all agree that the world, although it is, certain things are improving and certain things are advancing, that at no time is anyone operating under the impression that life is easy. Life is hard. Yep. And so it seems that the harder life gets, the more important these distractions and escapist pursuits become. And so, there is a certain truth to this idea that, when people are really feeling stressed and down and they get to come into a piano bar and they get to sort of forget about their cares and worries for a minute, that is a positive, that contributes something to the world. I try to cling to that. I'm not always successful in rationalizing it that way. I feel just as often like a total sellout and I'll lose it. But something like can happen like last night. Last night somebody put up something about, I forget exactly what it was. There was something mentioning about somebody's birthday, and without any context at all, I was just like, okay, and I pulled this woman up out of the audience, and she sat up on the piano, and I sang her a bit of a naughty ditty, as is my tendency, and that's the dueling piano thing, and she was just, you know, stretching out her legs and, you know, coiffing her hair and playing it up for laughs, and her whole family was taking pictures. It was really fun for them. And I got a kick out of it too, but I didn't really give it much thought beyond that. I'm like, it's your birthday, you're in Vegas, great, I'm glad you had a good time. Well, about 5 minutes later, her daughter came up to me and handed me a note that said, thank you so very much for doing what you just did. My mother is dying, and you just made her night. So that was pretty heavy. Yeah. I'm getting a little verklempt. So yeah, that was more along the lines of it. You know what I mean? It's still not quite what I'd had in mind. You know, it
almost never is, my friend.
Right. Nothing quite works out the way we think it's going to. But as an aspiring budding artist back in the day, I honestly thought, you know, there's a line in one of my favorite songwriter songs. It's like, I've been listening to the Beatles, I've been listening to the Who, and they don't know it yet, but they're going to listen to me too.
Right.
That's what I had planned. That was the plan. So that's not what's happening.
No, but you know, I'll tell you, you know, how many people do you think over the many years have watched you play? I mean, a lot of budding musicians in their teens and even early 20s that now are working cubicle jobs. and they look at you going, God, I should have stuck with it, or God, or maybe I just didn't have the chops. Look at this guy; he's crushing it every night.
Yeah, I mean,
and I guarantee there's people out there. I mean, like, I can't play a lick. My daughter, you know, plays by what do they call it? By ear, has a good ear, and she can just hear a song and then play it on the piano, and I'm like,
that's amazing.
I can't even do chopsticks. You know what I mean?
Well, of course you could in time, but yes, obviously some people have a predisposition towards being good at one thing or another, whether it's sports or photography or music or whatever it is. But anything can be learned, you know what I mean? And especially with the modern music-making tools. This is the democratization of technology I was talking about. This is where it's actually the sword cuts both ways, because on the one hand, it's like, okay, so someone like you says, I can't play a note. You could launch GarageBand, and I assure you, if I showed you how to use it properly, you could compose 10 songs in a week.
Oh, don't get me wrong, Kevin. If you go back and listen to any of my latest podcasts, the intro I did with my daughter on.
There you go. See, so you're talking. So okay, so it used to be that you had to have piano lessons, exhaustive piano lessons, like that. That's what it required to be able to get to the place where you could do what you just described. And now for you, it's you and your daughter launching GarageBand, and boom.
And literally, what she made, I said, hey, I want to make an instrumental, you know, just for my intro. And I said, play me. I'll tell you what parts I like. And she just started hitting all these tracks, you know, bass. I go, no, more jazzy. Okay, more soulful. No, okay, I like that one. Okay, let's find a piano for that part. And she would hit all these piano tracks, and I'm like, okay, I kind of like that one. You know, so for me, it wasn't like learning the notes. It was just like, this is what I want to hear, and this is what I like.
But that's sort of the beauty of the thing. So it's sort of being able to, it's almost like color swatches of fabric or paint. You're like, you know, this is giving me this feeling. I like this color here. You know, it used to be you had to slavishly sit there and master this physical muscle memory thing in order to get anywhere near that level of expression, and now that's just not required. But what's weird, the other side of that same coin, you would think, and it has happened to a certain degree. There are some amazing things being done with technology and music now. But you would definitely think that with all of the crazy tools that are available, that music would be more complex and more interesting and compelling and sonically diverse than ever. And in reality, the opposite is true. Because I often say things like, man, if I had had this GarageBand thing when I was 16 years old, who knows what I could have come up with? Because I was dealing with fairly primitive tools by comparison, which were very advanced compared to the ones that came in the 70s and the 60s, but we're still nothing like the ones today. And I think to myself, man, I would have never left my room. I would have written 3,000 songs. I could have been a major star for all I know. But now
you could have put them on. You could have put them on YouTube and been found.
Right. But now I have these tools, and I don't utilize them in that way. I mean, I utilize them to sort of shortcut the creative process, but I certainly have yet to sort of push the sonic boundaries and create. I mean, if you think about something like Switched On Bach, which was a big deal when it came out, that was this person, Walter Carlos, now Wendy Carlos, but this composer who had one note at a time capability with this huge electronic instrument, massive. It like took up an entire wall, you know, and with patch cables sticking out of it and all this other stuff. And they took this one note at a time thing and turned it into a symphony of electronic music. And here I have actual recorded, sampled symphonies in keyboards, and I have not done that. So it's just, you know, it's strange because on the one hand, it has made music so much more accessible to people, so much easier. I definitely hear people putting together their own bumper music for their podcasts, and you're not alone in that regard. And that's so cool. I just think that's so great, and what a cool personal touch to be able to add that to your project. But for an artist, it's sort of also, I don't know if this applies to other artists, but for me, it's a little discouraging. It's like, okay, well, this little clip that somebody put on GarageBand to be used for free is pretty much 50% cooler than anything I've ever played. So why am I sitting around trying to reinvent the wheel when all I have to do is, like, you know, copy and paste this thing? So it sort of both encourages and discourages innovation in a weird way. And so I'm still I think we're still, as a society, kind of, or, you know, artists, I think, are still kind of coming to grips with how to maximize this massive renaissance in the tools that we use, because when it comes right down to it, records are still being made in fairly traditional ways, with fairly traditional instruments.
And there are podcasters out there who have millions of listeners, millions, and you've never heard of them because they're not on a mainstream media. They're not on the what we consider the traditional channels. The kids all know about them,
right?
But you know, the old people like me, 40 and over type thing, are like, oh, podcast, what's that? You know, a lot of my friends are like, what's the podcast? I'm like, hey, dude, let's go to your phone. I'm like, yeah, see that big pink button with that's all podcasts. Like, oh wow, how do I? I've had to show people that they can listen to Anthony Robbins for free, and all these other motivational people, or auto people, or musicians, and comedians are doing free, you know, and they're free. I'm like, you can listen to Bill Burr every Monday. You know, you don't have to drive up to Sunset Boulevard and go to the Comedy Store to hear Bobby Lee or any of these other comedians. They're doing a weekly show now for free. But yet, a lot of people don't even know what podcasts are. It's crazy to me. It's been mind blowing for me.
Well, podcasting is really intriguing to me because it is just left of center in terms of the mainstream. In other words, you're absolutely right. It sort of has made you a de facto broadcaster in your own right. You now are on a level playing field with someone like Bill Burr. The only difference being that his fame and notoriety from his career has lent to a baked-in listenership.
Audience, yeah.
Right, but other than that, there's no fundamental difference. It's really content-driven. In other words, if his show was really boring and your show was really dynamic, and then you suddenly managed to direct enough ears to your podcast, you could easily outstrip someone like that. And so, you know, it's unfortunately not the case with music in that particular way, just because the ways in which people digest music have changed so dramatically. And, you know, at the end of the day, a musician relies on you buying their, sort of the way you would buy an artist's canvas, you know, or a print. Really, it's a print, right? Because they're keeping the original, and then they're giving you print. So if you use that analog, you know, that's kind of what isn't happening, right? So now people are not sort of going to record stores and filtering through new artist bins and going, what's this? And finding new discoveries. They're sort of setting a Pandora or Spotify channel to a genre, and then sort of kind of the equivalent of swiping left and right on a dating app. They're thumbs upping or downing a particular thing, maybe 5 seconds into the thing. It's not like they're hearing a song on the radio and they're deciding en masse whether they like it or not. It's
Well, yeah, I mean, the days of me knowing every song and every word of a Van Halen album, because I had to, I didn't want to scratch the record, so I had to listen to a song maybe I didn't like to get to the song I did like. As I'm reading the lyrics from those days are gone. I mean,
it's gone, and I really lament that.
You're not going to hear 10 songs from an artist anymore. They'll make them, but you won't listen to them all. You're not going to sit down and listen to them all. You'll change.
Right, and there is a resurgence in vinyl, which shows you that there are people who still want that tactile experience. Yeah, they want liner notes. They want cool art. They want colored vinyl. They want all these sort of things that, but it's a niche. It's a niche.
I was going to say, are they doing it to be hipsterish? Because, I mean, dude, I still have all my albums. And a lot of them I have hanging up on my wall in my back room because I love the artwork. They have memories to me,
Right.
But in reality, I have my Amazon Echo. I have my Spotify. Wendy has her Pandora. And I'll hit... Alexa, play Tears for Fears channel, and I'll hear all my 80s songs. Alexa, play Luciano Pavarotti, and I'll hear my Andrea Bocelli and all my other opera. And it's instantaneous, man. And I don't even have to press a button anymore. I just have to speak a couple words, and I have music.
More Jetsons. I mean, this is the thing, and what you just said is very interesting. So you're saying, Alexa, play this artist, and it's not taking you at your word. It's not digging into your library and just triggering your recordings that you purchased of this one artist.
I do that
stuff.
too.
You can do that too, but that's not what it's designed to do. It is now designed specifically to steer you into a stream where like artists are all presented sort of together, and then you can decide whether you like or you want to skip or whatever. But basically, like you said, it's Bocelli and him and the three tenors together and like all this other stuff. And so, but the original idea behind that was to introduce you to other artists that you may be a fan of this genre and not know this artist. And when you hear them, you're going to be like, I want that, and then click and buy. And it's that last little leg of the journey that unfortunately consumers seemingly are no longer willing to do. Because as long as they're able to call it up for free, they're not going to pay even $1 in order to own it. And that is distressing because, I can't think of many other... There's nothing you can do about it. And the genie's already out of the bottle on that. And I was guilty too. I certainly didn't mean to contribute to the death of my industry, but I absolutely did. I wasn't super... I forget what Napster. I wasn't like all about Napster, but when there were other alternative sharing sites at that time, I did very specifically go after a certain few number of artists that were really hard to find their records in stores, and so I would do downloads, and people were kind of uploading. It was like sort of the digital version of bootlegging Dead concerts or something. And so, I participated in that, and as a result, I contributed to the death of an industry, and I feel really badly about that because I'm as affected by it as anybody. There's almost no point now in creating original music to release it for the end game of making a living doing so. That is almost a gone era,
Yeah, and so, you'll have to find other ways, whether it's YouTube, whether it's any of the other videos, that type of thing, because that's the same way with my podcast, and like for now, it's kind of a weird deal. Like I got asked to be a guest on a radio talk show today.
Wow.
And I'm like, so the guy contacted me, through my internet and all that, and I talked to him today, and he's got a talk show on terrestrial radio in Miami, and he wants someone to talk about business travel.
Cool.
And I'm just like, what? 5 months ago, this wasn't even a thought to me, and now I'm getting asked to be on a radio show.
That's amazing. That is straight up amazing. I mean, you certainly have inspired me by taking something that was, sort of a sideline for you, and turning it into something that is bringing you not only great enjoyment, but is delivering life experiences, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is super inspiring. I would love to do something along those lines. I thought that music would do that.
I think you could do your vegan podcast in a heartbeat, and it would be a hit. It's all about, and here's really what separates the successful from the unsuccessful is, of course, I have undying, unbridled passion for veganism and talking about food, and I think I could even be personable enough to pull it off. But having the discipline and organization required to do the deep dive, which is what you've done, and really set it up in a logical manner and really take the steps to sort of get everything in line, that's not my strong suit. That's maybe not most artists' strong suit. We're not known for our organizational capacity generally. There are a few exceptions, but Zappa, Tom Schultz from Boston, couple of people like that are really sophisticated in that way. But otherwise, it's really kind of it's a tantalizingly close dream. It's like I can see the fruit is hanging there, but I just haven't gotten up on the ladder and pulled it down yet. So, when you do, I will have you back on my podcast.
I would love that. We can talk about veganism that much more.
Exactly. Well, I know you gotta get to work, my friend.
I do at that, but thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you about all this stuff, and
it's been awesome.
being on the road and being a vegan has been an adventure, and it's been an ever changing one, and it's gotten a lot easier as time goes on, and I anticipate that pretty soon that it won't even be a big deal. It'll just be business as usual. Every business
it's going to be no different than do you want chicken, beef, or vegetarian or vegan?
Right. I mean, it's like, do you want a burger or do you want a Beyond Burger? It'll be just that simple, and won't that be a fun time?
That'd be weird. It's for me. Like when I go to Applebee's or whatever, I'll get a salad, and they ask what protein do you want, and I said I'll take the black bean patty, and they're like, oh, okay.
See, that's amazing. That's right there. That is a shift because words matter, and so the fact that we've gone away from like chicken, fish, or beef to what kind of protein do you want? So we recognize. Yeah, we recognize that the key word is protein. You want a protein source, and now it's sort of an undefined, these range of proteins. That's where we're headed in food in general. Is we're getting away from these very limiting ideas about food, and we're going towards the nuts and bolts about what makes food, valuable, which is
what does your body need.
Yeah, you're right. Your body needs, and so this can be accomplished in a bunch of different ways, and it's an exciting time. I will say that it's a rapidly expanding field. As far as I understand, veganism has expanded 600% in the last 4 years. I don't know of any other quadrant of the food marketplace where that's true.
And you should be a part of it, my friend.
I'm going to try. I'm inspired by you and people like you, so I want to do my bit to sort of spread the word the way you're getting out there and enlightening people on the vagaries of travel for work. Cause
I will help you however I can.
I appreciate it very much.
All right, man. Well, have fun tonight at work.
Will do.
Go inspire some music, people.
I will. I will try to go do my best to be an inspiring monkey indeed.
There you go. All right, brother.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Have a good night. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
You too. Sounds good.